Hi and welcome. In this video, we'll look at how Clappia can serve as a Google Forms alternative, can help connect your forms to your databases for real-time updates. Google Forms is a great way for creating simple forms, but connecting it to a database can be complicated. It usually needs custom scripts or extra tools to make it work. With Clappia, connecting to databases like MySQL or Azure SQL, etc. is simple. You can collect data in your app, and every submission or edit will automatically update your database. For example, if you're managing an employee MIS, you can use Clappia to collect employee details and have them reflected in your database instantly. Let's see how this works with a simple example. I will take the example of transferring data from Clappia apps to MySQL database for this video, but you can also integrate it to other databases such as Postgres or Azure SQL. Let's say I want to maintain sales leads data. So first I will give the command to create a table, then specify the table's name. Let's say sales leads data itself, and then I'll define the relevant fields. Let's say there will be an ID field followed by the data type, which can be an integer. Next I can have customer name with variable character as the data type, then customer email, phone number, and stage, all with variable character as the data type. I will also set the primary key in this table as ID. Do ensure you have a primary key set in your table to act as reference to the submission. I'll run the command. Now that I've created the table, let's check it. You can see the table is now set up, with each field assigned its respective data type. Of course, the sales leads data may contain more important fields, but I've just kept it short for the sake of this example. And this table is newly created, so it won't have any data in it yet, as you can see over here. Now, based on these database fields, I will create an app in Clappia with the same fields and while keeping the same data types in mind. Now I'll go to my Clappia dashboard. I'll click on New App since I'll be creating the app from scratch. Now in Design App, I'll give a name to this app first. Let's say Sales Leads. Then I'll add a section and give a name to the section on the right-hand panel. Save this. Now I will add the required fields. So the first one I had given was ID. So for that, I could probably use the unique numbering block and then configure it on the right-hand panel. I'll give the same name ID. I'll leave the description blank, it's not required. I'll also leave the prefix blank because I set the database field as an integer. Now I could put a number as the prefix instead, but I'll just leave it as it is. I'll maybe keep the minimum length as 7 and I'll start the sequence from 1 and save this. Next I can add another field for the customer name, so I could use a single line text block for that. Save this. Add another field for capturing the email of the customer, so an email input block would be useful. The next field I had added was a phone number, so I'll select this field, save it as it is, and finally for the stage, I'll use a single selector block. I'll give in some options here and save it. Now my app interface is complete, and in App Home this is what it looks like, where the users will be able to fill in some details and click on Submit to make a submission. But before that, now that the app structure is ready, we'll connect it to the database. So I'll go back to the Design app, go to Step 2 which is Configuration, and then click on Database Integration. On the right-hand panel, enable this option. Now under Select Database Type, since I've used MySQL, I'll select this option, then enter the database host name. Then for port, it's usually 3306 for MySQL. Enter the username and password, give the database name, enter the exact name of your database, then click on Authenticate. Once authenticated, an additional option will appear to select a table from the database. These are all the tables that exist in my database that I've selected. I will select the one which I created earlier, which is Sales Leads data. Now map each Clappia field to the corresponding database fields. All these fields have come from the database table, and underneath each field, map it to the fields from the Clappia app. So in Design app, I'll just open up another tab. You will get the variables on top of every field in brackets to map with, after saving them of course. This is useful to know in case your fields have a different name than the ones in the database table. Here I've just given the field names exactly as it is. To pull the fields from the Clappia app, simply type in @ followed by the field name. So for ID, it's immediately listed here, so I'll just click on it. For customer name, @ customer name. You can type in the field name if you have multiple fields. Now once all fields are mapped, click on Save. The database integration is now complete. Now let's make a test submission. I'll go to App Home. Since the ID field is a unique numbering block, the value will be auto-generated, and I'll fill in the rest of the fields. I filled in all the fields and now I'll click on Submit. All submissions can be viewed under the Submissions tab. If you're an app admin, you will be able to view all the submissions, and your users, if they have the appropriate app permissions, will also be able to view submissions. Click on a submission to open a right panel to view all the details. Now let's check if this submission has been pushed to the database. So I'll go back to the terminal. I'll run the command, and the new submission is now reflected in the table. Anytime a submission is made, it will automatically sync with the database in real time. So if I were to make another submission, I'll go back to App Home, fill in some details, click on Submit. In the Submissions tab, I have the second submission here, and if I go to the terminal again, run the command, you can see the second submission. Now sometimes you may need to make changes to your existing data. And if I edit an existing submission in Clappia, so let's say I go back to my Submissions tab in Clappia and make an edit to this submission. Let's say I change the stage from contacted to in progress and save it. This change will also be reflected in the database instantly. You can see the stage now says in progress over here. However, for this to work, the table must have a primary key, which is why I set it earlier. Since I have already set ID as the primary key, the database can match the submission and update only the changed data. If you haven't set a primary key, you will need to add one in your database. This is important because the primary key ensures that any edits made in Clappia will automatically reflect in the database. Without it, the system won't be able to identify which record needs to be updated, so the changes won't sync. It's always better to use a field with unique values as a primary key, which is why I selected the ID field. The change is immediately updated in the database. Now, what if you want to delete a submission? So let's go back. If I archive a submission in Clappia, so on the right panel, click on the three dots and select Archive Submission, then select OK. This will also be removed from the database. I'll just refresh this over here. You can see the submission no longer appears, and it should be removed in the database as well. Again, running the command, and in this table, the second submission has been removed. If you were to permanently delete your submission, you will not be able to get it back. You will not be able to get it back to the database unless you make another fresh submission. However, if you were to restore the archived submission, it will be re-added to the database. So let me select Restore Submission. The submission is added back over here, and in Terminal, it is added back here as well. This ensures that only active submissions are stored in the database while keeping the option to restore data if needed. I have linked more information about archiving submissions in the description if you wish to know more about it. Now this integration also works on the Clappia mobile app. Anytime a submission is made on the mobile app, it will be reflected in your database. So let's check that out. Over here, you can see my mobile screen with the Clappia app downloaded. If you haven't downloaded it already, you can do so either on Play Store or App Store. And the moment you create your app, it'll be live and ready to be used. So I'll go ahead and click on it. I'll select the Sales Leads app. I'll make a submission. I filled in all the details. Now I'll click on Submit. Let's check if the database has been updated. I'll run the command, and it has been updated. Now, some more things to keep in mind. Firstly, if you want to bulk upload your data into Clappia by using the option over here, then that data will not appear in your database. You will need to contact our support team to enable this. What you can do is click on the button over here and raise a support request. Once we have given you the confirmation, then you can go ahead and use the bulk upload feature to upload submissions in bulk, and it should reflect in your database. Secondly, if you disable the database integration, so in Design app, again under Configurations and Database Integration, if you disable this, any new submissions made to Clappia will not be pushed to the database. Let me make another submission while this is disabled. I click on Submit. Now in my Submissions tab, the submission appears here, but in my database table, it does not. The last submission was the one that I had made through the mobile app. Since integration is disabled, this new entry will not appear in the database. If I re-enable the integration, You will have to authenticate it again and save it. The submission made while the feature was disabled will not be retroactively pushed. So let's say I do save this and go back to terminal and run the command. The latest submission does not appear. So do ensure database integration is always enabled if you want continuous sync. Finally, keep in mind about data types. For example, I have set the ID field as integer in the database. If I modify the ID field in Clappia and for the prefix, I would type in some letters. The submission will not be pushed to the database since the data type does not match unless the prefix does contain numbers. I could have given the data type as variable character, but for this example, I wanted to make note of this little detail. So always ensure that data types match between the Clappia app and the database to prevent integration errors. So this is how you can integrate Clappia with an external database for real-time sync. The same steps apply to PostgreSQL and Azure SQL as well. If you have any questions about database integration or on any other feature in Clappia, you can always request support by clicking on the button over here. Choose the appropriate option that is convenient for you and we'll get in touch. Thank you.